Hello and welcome to part 3 of the cursed Macintosh SE. Now, if you haven't seen the previous 2 episodes, I'd recommend starting there because we tore this machine apart and we found a lot of crazy stuff inside. And we also started to address some of its interesting quirks. But today, I have good news. We can finally start building this thing out. So stay tuned. And if you like vintage Macs and seeing how far we can upgrade old computers, please subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell thing so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. So I was finally able to get this thing out with the careful workings of a used guitar pick, which is pretty pointy at the end, and just gradually working it underneath and around. And I guess he didn't actually use that much glue or that good of a glue because it did finally work itself out. So now we can go about putting some of these drives in there, including our working CD-ROM drive. And I got a black bezel for the SCSI to SD adapter in case we want to put it here, but I really think we're going to put the Jazz drive there. And I also picked up something I'm very excited about. I think I found the perfect mouse for this machine. This is a Next 2-button mouse and it's wonderfully clicky. And it's an ADB mouse, of course, so it'll work just fine on our SE30. Though there is the small detail of this being a Next mouse with the Next logo right here. And if we want our SE30 to really be an alternate universe Macintosh, I think this should be an Apple logo. So I have no idea if this is going to work well or not, but I bought these cool little Apple logo stickers and they're just big enough, I think, to cover the Next logo. So I'm just going to stick it on there. All right, well, it doesn't look amazing, but I don't want to actually change the plastic on the Next mouse. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. All right, let's see about fitting that CD-ROM drive in this opening. All right, well, it was pretty finicky, but it's in there and it's flush with these bezels here and it looks pretty good. I mean, if we paint this thing black, I think it'll look awesome. So I guess let's see if it still works. And we'll see if it boots up off of the SD card again, and looks like it does. So we're booted off of the SD card, CD-ROM drive opens and closes, and then doesn't go on to do it 100 times on its own, so that's pretty good. So I think what I want to do now is try to install 8.1 on this thing. Now, a lot of people have mentioned in the comments that 8.1 requires a 68040 processor, which Apple said that it does, but in reality, it doesn't. You can install this perfectly well on an SE30. We've got enough RAM in here, and this is on an SD card, which is pretty fast, so I think it might be okay. And we've got our new nice and clicky Next mouse. So normally if you were to try to install macOS 8 on here, the installer would yell at you and say, macOS 8 is not compatible with this computer. But I have a handy little software on here called Wish I Were, which allows me to make the machine think it's any other machine. And currently I have it set to Quadra 700, which is what the Gamba instructions say to use. And I'll link those instructions below. But now we should be able to go into software installers and system software, macOS 8, and install it. All right, well, installation was successful. But before we boot into macOS 8, we need to boot into the ROM disk because we need to do a little bit of ResEdit hacking. And basically, I'm just going to be following the guide on vintageapple.org, which has a specific page for hacking this onto the SE30. And really, it involves opening the system file in ResEdit, and then we're going to make a couple of tweaks that the guide tells us to make. I don't know what those tweaks do, but we just have to change a couple numbers in here. And then in addition to this tweak, we also have to open a further 2 files that are provided by vintageapple.org, which give us some whole things to replace. So instead of just tweaking numbers, we'll copy and paste all of the numbers into the file. But it's pretty easy to do, and I won't show the whole thing here, but again, I'll definitely link this below in case you want to hack OS 8 onto your own SE30. Oh my god, we are in macOS 8 on our SE30. Check that out. Platinum theme in 1-bit color. Can't even see the entire macOS setup assistant. All right. So look how huge the Apple is in the Apple menu. About this computer, macOS 8.0 on our SE30 with 128 megs of RAM. So this doesn't feel as slow as I thought it would. Wonder if we can set the desktop background to a picture. Let's go with Glacier National Park. Doesn't actually seem to want to work. I guess we're getting a little bit of that slowdown now. Yeah, it's not the fastest thing ever, but it works. And check that out. Glacier National Park in all of its 1-bit glory. But we can go a little bit farther. Let's upgrade this to macOS 8.1. All right, well, I just redid the ResEdit hacks from 8.0 on the 8.1 system folder, and it looks like it worked. All right, let's see what we've got. Hey, we did it. macOS 8.1. So we now have the highest possible operating system for an SE30. Just a little bit hacked into there, but hey, it works great so far. So I think now let's focus on the rest of the build for this machine. All right, so if we want to be able to use our awesome internal Jazz drive, we're going to need to get rid of this SCSI cable and go back to the original, which has many more connectors. And it also has the terminator here built in, which I don't know if that's going to cause a problem because the SCSI to SD does its own termination, but I guess we'll find out. And while we're down here, I wanted to see if we could come up with any ideas on how to mount the CD-ROM, because it's not like there's holes for it. And the previous owner, I guess, tried some different holes and had actually drilled holes into the old CD-ROM, but maybe we can build a bracket or something. But let's see if anything even comes close to lining up down here. So there actually are two screw holes down here, one here and one here. And I must have forgotten about them. I'm sure they were there before, but they hold the drive in quite well, as I shall now demonstrate. So I put this top screw in, and this drive is not going anywhere. The only problem is, of course, the power cable for the motherboard can now no longer get through its little pass-through here in the case. So what you would have to do is install the motherboard and connect it first, and then screw this in, but of course you can't screw it in then because the motherboard's covering these screw holes. So what do? I actually don't know. I think what the previous owner had done probably was thread this through here first, then screw the CD-ROM drive in, then install the motherboard and like finagle it into this connector, which is already through this hole. So maybe we can find some kind of a bracket that'll be a little bit more of a sane way to do that. But I mean, there's also not really anything sane about this computer. And then another consideration I had was that this CD-ROM drive is actually quite noisy in there, and screwing it in would probably help a lot. But then I had the idea of using these little Noctua rubber bits, which are actually meant to be an alternative to screws for a PC case. If you're installing this, you pull these through the screw hole instead of pulling them, or instead of using a screw. But I think we might be able to pull these through in the case here and use these as an alternative to those washers that the previous owner put in here to space out the drive and also reduce vibration. And they do seem to fit in here quite well. Yeah, look at that. It's like they were made to do it. And then the drive kind of sits on there and has a nice bit of shock absorption. And then for the Jazz drive here, we'll stick this on top again. And just for the sake of laying things out, we'll use a bit of double-sided tape, but hopefully this is not our permanent solution. All right, that actually slots in there pretty well. And then for now, we'll just put our SD card right there, and I guess double-side tape that there as well. And I eventually want to mount it somewhere, maybe pointing out back. I know they make extenders that can take, you can plug the extender into the SD card slot here and then put the extender out somewhere else. It's just a ribbon cable, so maybe we could put this out of the Kensington lock that way. But for now, I've got this little mini USB cable here, which I'm going to plug in here, and then I've whittled this down a bit so it'll fit through the Kensington lock slot. And that way, at least we'll have a convenient way to connect this thing up to USB to read the files on the boot drive without having to take the back off until we figure out a more elegant solution. So I guess that means this is going to have to point this way, or at least sideways. All right, so that's about what our cable management situation will look like. Everything is connected, except for the motherboard, of course. So why don't we pop the motherboard back in here and see if this thing is going to work. All right, it's all back together in pretty good approximation of what it's going to look like. I've got the Jazz drive, the CD-ROM drive, and the SCSI to SD, so 3 drives in this machine. So obviously the SCSI to SD works. Let's test out these other 2. All right, CD-ROM drive. We'll use our SE30 Stuff CD. And it's still a bit loud. Yeah, those Noctua things didn't make a huge difference, but hey, it works. All right, we'll have to think of a different way to drown out that sound, because that is a bit loud, so we need to think of something. All right, next, let's see if the Jazz drive works. Spinning up. Well, I heard it seeking for a second. All right, let's try a different Jazz disc. All right, I'm going to assume that's a driver issue. All right, I installed the drivers from iOmega for Jazz and zip drives, and now it works just fine. So our Jazz drive mounted this 1 gig Jazz disk, and I guess this person had a StyleWriter 1200, which popped up on my desktop here. And this has wow, a whole lot of stuff in here. A 2CI folder with a bunch of applications. Telnet 2.7 from 1996. A Performa 636 folder. I guess this guy had a lot of crazy Macs. Well, that's something to explore on a different day, but what I'm curious about, can we use both drives at the same time? Let's find out. Oh man, look at that. Amazing. Mounted a CD and a Jazz disc at the same time, and has our SD card hard drive, so that's 3 drives running at the same time in this SE30. That's amazing. All right, let's pop the back on this thing and just get a feel for what the end product's going to look like. All right, so I've got them back together, and before we turn them on, I did find a bit of a longer USB cable to run out the back of them. So I want to check and make sure that this feature works. So I'm going to plug it into my trusty 12-inch PowerBook G4 here. All right, well, that feature doesn't seem to work. Yeah, I'm going to call this video here. So we now have a fully working, crazy cursed Mac SE30 with maxed out RAM, 3 internal drives, including an SD card for an SSD, the Gigabyte Jazz drive, and a SCSI CD-ROM, all working and all can work at the same time. We've updated this thing to macOS 8.1, which is supposed to require 68040, but we have it here on our 68030, and, well, it runs okay. And as far as what's next for this machine, I'm going to take the motherboard and I'm going to ship it to my friend Steve at Mac84, who's going to recap it. And if we're lucky, we might even see him stream it, which would be pretty cool to watch. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.